Thank you very much, Brendan, for that piece of music. It started off very complicated with lots of notes, but has ended up on a single musical note. Even more simple than that, it's ended up on something we'd call a pure tone. It's just got one frequency in it. Actually, that's unlike most musical notes because it's too pure. Through this talk, we're going to use this sort of display a lot, so I think it gives an idea what it's all about. If maybe you could just play a simple scale starting at low and going up in frequency, you'll see how the green trace changes as we go up in frequency. So what you see in blue and pink is showing you what happened just recently, and what's showing in green is what's happening at one particular note. And from the left to the right, it's low to high frequency. Now, what I'd like to do is to make it sound more musical, because that's a pure tone. It's only got one frequency in it. And as we add more frequencies, it becomes more musical. And although the pitch doesn't change, the quality of the sound changes. And that's because of all the extra peaks that you can see appearing. And they're called harmonics. And they're vital to the quality of music. Now, we're using a synthesizer here because we can easily change it. If I was to compare two acoustic instruments, let's say a saxophone and a violin, the differences would be shown up by how these different patterns of harmonics show up. Thank you, Brendan. And I want to actually look at one particular kind of singing, which shows an extreme case of the use of harmonics. So if Oniko could come on, please. Now, she has a really unusual singing skill, and it's overtone singing. And maybe you could just give us a demonstration to start with.
Will do. Can you play me an F?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I'm going to start actually a little bit lower. If you listened closely, you could hear that I was singing a fundamental note, a fundamental tone, which is the low tone that I'm singing, and that I'm also filtering out other harmonics so you can hear a whistling tone at the top. So listen again and see if you can hear it.
And when you're listening, also look, you'll see there's low frequency stuff on the left-hand side, and about in the middle, there's the high whistle comes out as well. You'll see them as pink lines.
Okay.
It's an incredible skill. I mean, I've tried this once, and I certainly can't get it to work. You've only got one instrument, and yet you're making two sounds. And what you're playing with, which is really clever, is how the brain listens to sound. Normally, if I played a note like I did on the piano, your brain lumps all these harmonics together and says, there's one note, it's an event, it's a piano note, because otherwise the brain gets overloaded with things to deal with. But you filter the sound so precisely that your brain hears both the low frequencies and high frequencies differently. I wonder, do you think someone from the audience could have a go at this?
Yes, I think we should. Do we have anyone
like
who would like to volunteer and try?
You sure? This is your one time to get an overtone singing lesson for free. Would you like to come and give it a go?
All right.
Can we have a round of applause for our volunteer, please?
A bit short, sorry.
Yeah.
What's the name, by the way?
Magda.
Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to maybe same note as me.
Okay.
So just start with ah. Ready? Ah. Okay, so what you're doing is your vocal folds are working. If everyone puts their hand on their throat and they say ah. feel that vibration happening there.
Yeah.
And then what we're doing is we're filtering that sound. So the first way that we're going to filter the sound is if you take, imagine that's the roof of your mouth, you're taking the tip of your tongue with a very strong L. Quite front. And so we're going to start with ah, and then you make an L. Ready? Ah. So already you can hear the quality of that sound is changing because of the filter that we're adding. Now we're going to change the filter even more. You're going to take that tongue and you're going to keep that really strong point and go all the way as far back as you possibly can. Again, quite strong.
Okay.
Try it.
I think that's worth a round of applause just to start with. That was amazing.
Yeah. Well done. So she's already filtering, and the final thing that she can do, that you can do to filter that sound, is to, with that tongue, and then filter it with the lips a little bit more. Say ew. That's your final one. Okay, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go. There's even more. Well done, Magda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. It is amazing because that filtering, although it needs a lot of practice, is something you do all the time, and I'm doing as I speak to you at this moment. So, for example, I can show you here. It's a video of someone in an fMRI scanner, normally used to scan brains, and this is actually what you're doing all the time when you're talking. So the vocal folds, which are the things which buzz, are down here, and you can, when they speak, you can see how much we're manipulating the tubes that are above our vocal folds. So it's amazing how much flexibility, and that's actually a really key skill, and why we were able to develop language as an animal was our ability to manipulate, particularly like our tongue. Did you realise how big it was? And that's a really important skill for us. And you might think this overtone singing is a kind of fairly esoteric kind of piece of singing, maybe only seen in Mongolia, but actually it's also being used in pop records. And I'll give you an example from Massive Attack here.
Karmacoma, Jamaica and Roma, Karmacoma, Jamaica and Roma, Karmacoma, Jamaica and Roma, Karmacoma, Jamaica and Roma.
So you can clearly hear the use of overtone singing. So thank you very much, Hanako. We have a round of applause, please. So when you hear different musical instruments, you're hearing those different timbres from those harmonics. But I also wanted to look at how, when we play more than one note, which is what obviously Brendan started with, how they interact, because the interaction of harmonics creates a very different sound. Sometimes if you go up on the piano and put your notes, your fingers on the keys, you'll get something that sounds pleasant. We call it consonant. And other times we put your fingers down and it'll sound horrible and nasty. It's dissonant. And Phil, I think, who's going to come on and help me out here, because he's a pianist and I'm not, he's going to play you a piece of music which will start off nice and consonant, so it should sound fairly pleasant. And over time, it will morph into something a bit more strange. That's nice and pleasant, that, isn't it? Do you feel the tension rising a little there? A bit of dissonance coming in, a bit of clashing in the notes. Getting more and more tension. Almost getting nasty now. I was waiting for him to resolve that, because actually the tension builds with the dissonance, and in the end you want to hear that final chord. It comes home and it feels good. We like this feeling. It's a bit like being on a roller coaster. You're at the top of the roller coaster thinking, what's going to happen now? And you get to the bottom and it's, there's a nice kind of release. The same thing happens with music, with dissonance and consonance. Now, an interesting scientific question is that something you learn from listening to music during your childhood and adulthood? Or are you born with consonant sounds nice, dissonance sounds unpleasant? And this is something scientists have tried to study. And one thing that a scientist did from the Max Planck Institute was to go to see a remote tribe who had never heard Western music and play them very dissonant music. And what they're trying to find out is whether they had the same reaction that people who were brought up with Western music would have. And I can give you a sense of this, of how they did it, by playing a piece by James Blunt. So it's a James Blunt piece you've probably heard. We'll just get the sense of which one we're going to work with.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true.
So that's a nice consonant sound. It's nice, pleasant. He wanted to make an unpleasant version so he could get them to compare it. So what he did is he took James Blunt and he pitch shifted them up. He can actually sing higher.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true.
And if he ever aspired to sound like Rick Astley, he could sound like this, but pitch shift him down a tritone.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true.
So if you want to make James Blunt sound dissonant, you add all three versions and it sounds like this.
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true.
And that's a way of making something very dissonant. When you hear some theme music in a moment, in the near future for Halloween, you'll notice often dissonance is added to give that sort of kind of spooky effect. So what do they find? Well, they found, interesting enough, that the Mafa tribe actually did prefer consonance over dissonance. So there seems to be something that maybe we're born with. But it's still quite controversial in the science community because another group, literally only a couple of months ago, published a paper which found the opposite result. So we had two people, one group saying, OK, consonance is something we're born to like, and another group saying, nah. So what we need is another experiment to decide which of these experiments was actually right and which one was actually wrong. Now, we started off by looking at harmonics, and that's a really crucial bit to the illusion that Phil is now going to show to us.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to play it. This is a file that I asked Trevor to render for me, and just have a listen to it. Music to feel sick by. Which way is it going? Down. It's always going down, isn't it? Always going down. But if I take the piano here and if I went, then very quickly I end up down here. Whereas that has completely different properties, doesn't it? It feels like it's always going down, but somehow it's just never getting anywhere. It's going down, and you can only sense that it's going down, but something happens which makes it not get anywhere. What is that thing? That's what we need to try and understand in order to understand what the illusion is. And I'll do a bit more playing because I'm going to play you a simpler version. It's an earlier version of that illusion. I was able to make these myself, so I'm going to Logic to trigger this, and just have a listen to this. Okay, so that is a scale. Yeah? We all agree that that's a scale, don't we? So if I just go over to the piano for a minute, just play a scale. It's one of those, isn't it? Yeah? It's absolutely like that. We all agree? Yeah. So when we have a look at the notes that are actually being played, I'll show you it in this screen first of all, and that should give you a little bit of a shock, because you can see the last note here is the same as the very first note. I'll just prove it to you. Have a listen to that. It's exactly the same as that. Look, there's no difference there. Yeah. And I can show you that in score as well. There we go. Look. So I'll play that there. I'll play that there. And just have a listen once more. And you're quite happy to accept that this note goes up there. It's going all the way up, still all the way up there. And when we get to the end, that we're still going up there. Yeah? And it feels like it's going just in a straight line like that. What's going on there? Our brains are very good at making continuity out of things. We seek continuity, so we seek steps. We know what a scale sounds like. So, of course, we want it to sound absolutely like a scale. But the more you listen to it, the more you can hear there are odd things going on in that. We can do it on some other scales as well. And it still works, but you begin to hear that there's some sneaky stuff going on. Let's see what that is. Now, I'm quite a visual person, so I'm going to put lots of diagrams in front of you and just talk to you about harmonics and things. So this is like a typical musical note. It's quite a low note. Its fundamental is at 100 hertz, so we might imagine it to be a trombone note or something like that. And there's our fundamental there. And usually with musical notes, our fundamental is giving us our sense of the pitch. It's usually much stronger. Yeah? And here are the rest of the harmonics that are present in the sound. It takes more energy to make harmonics, and they are present in lesser quantities in the whole of the sound there. If you want to appreciate what the harmonic series looks like, if you look at it in notation, you can see it there. And I can just give you a sense of that. Of course, when I play all of these strings, they have all of their own harmonics there. But I can give you this effect by doing that. Okay, and we'll let that fade away for a second. And I'll just put then a nice strong fundamental in here. And by the time that's all faded a bit, you only think there's one note there. Yeah? Because they're all blending in terms of the harmonic series. So there's our fundamental. And when we look at the harmonic series, we can see some of these are octaves. Just want to point out to you where the octaves are, both in notation. Not all of the harmonic series is octaves, but these are. They're all C's there. And when we look at this on the frequency chart, this is where they turn up. So the numbers are very easy here. It's 100, 200, and the 400 is an octave, the 800, the 1600, and 3200. So it's 2 times the fundamental frequency, 4 times, 8 times, 16 times, 32 times, and so on, if we want to go any further. It just keeps going. And the harmonic series actually gives us all the ratios by which we define our Western music scale. And when we listen to a particular note, they all are made from the harmonic series. This one is a square wave, okay? And we're just going to look at how a square wave is constructed. It's actually very similar to a clarinet. Okay, here's our square wave. Again, fundamental, which is the loudest note. It's going to give us our sense of the pitch. And the harmonics are quieter in this by specific ratios. And when you make a square wave, you actually suppress every other harmonic in the series. And a clarinet, which overblows at a 12th, is very like that. So we can have a nice strong note from the clarinet. Great, that's brilliant, thank you. Okay, that's what that sounds like. And this is what's happening over time. I told you I was going to be visual. Here's our fundamental here. Yeah, and at the same time, we're getting this harmonic. It's much less loud. And this harmonic, less loud again. And this one quieter again. And up here is the resultant waveform. This is what actually comes out. And here in this diagram, we can see them all superimposed on each other. Okay, so here's our fundamental here. And here's our harmonic. And the next harmonic. And here's the resultant wave file. That's what is actually happening. And in this diagram, you can see the harmonics actually being added in this animation here. They're added all the way up to 200. And as they're added, the resultant wave file gets more and more square. And we've got that happening in sound here. We're only going up to 20 harmonics here, but that's quite enough. And we're going to add them in once every second. Whoops. Here we go. And hear just how much like a clarinet that's sounding, particularly at the end when it's just coming off. Yeah, it's got very similar properties to it, but we're adding the component sine waves to create that sound. As you hear the harmonics going in, you definitely hear an individual sound, don't you? But by the time the next harmonic's gone in, and the one after that, you're not hearing the ones before. It's fusing into the original sound. Okay, so this is our square wave. Fundamental's the loudest, and the fundamental normally gives us our sense of pitch. But what if we do something a bit different? Okay, this is our Shepard tone that you were listening to at the beginning. Okay, and it's quite often likened to an Escher painting. So I've got a nice simple one here. And like our tone, we're going down the steps here, we're going round the corner, still going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. And we get to here, and we're still going down. How does that work? It's a trick of perspective, but the Shepard tone does it in audio. This is how it does it. So here we're making our component sine waves for a note from the Shepard tone scale that you heard. What do you notice about this compared to a typical musical note? Here's where the loudest ones are there. Okay, so they're right in the middle. So what's going to give us our sense of pitch here? It's likely to be these two, could be those. Depends on what came before it. Depends on what comes after it. And we're going to have harmonics which are all octaves. So nothing to confuse you, just octaves there as to what the sense of pitch is. So you know you're always going to be hearing the same pitch whichever register it's in. So we're missing those. And down here, we're going to be bringing in very low signals, very low. So if we were to make a new note here, if we imagine this was our first note in the scale, and make our next note, we'd start by going, that's our fundamental there, and there's our next harmonic, next sine wave, and one there, one there, one there, one there. And we'd also need, because this has moved along that much, a tiny, tiny new fundamental there that you probably wouldn't pay any attention to start off with. Okay, now when we look at this, that is very definitely the loudest component in this new note here. But we could probably have our sense of pitch drawn that way or drawn that way, depending on what we heard before or what we heard afterwards. And the very first thing I played to you, that descending Shepard Risset, this is how you make one of these. We're going to take all of our harmonics and we're going to make them descend all together. Just slide them all down, keeping that space of an octave apart. And that is called a Shepard Risset glissando. Okay, and you can actually see that happening on this video here. So what you can't do, I think, is stop the illusion from happening. You can't stop it from feeling like it's always going up or going down, depending on which way it's built. But what you can do is pay attention to what your brain is getting. We never do get access to the raw sound because it's pre-processed and it's a pre-conscious thing. So what we're given is a suggestion of what the pitch is. And you can see when your attention moves and it's going down, and it's going down, and it's going down, and it goes up, and it's going down, and it's going down. That's so quick that most of the time you won't notice it, particularly in the first run through. But now you know how it's made, you can sense when your pitch is being drawn up and pulled down again. It's drawn up again, and it's pulled down again. And that particularly works when it's going faster, doesn't it? So, there we have the Shepard tone, the Shepard Rise glissando. And this lecture is audio illusions and other musical curiosities. So we want to put some more music in now. And this is a piece which is made using additive synthesis. And additive synthesis is something so old that we've almost forgotten how to do it. But I love working with additive synthesis, and I've wanted for quite a long time to make a piece that involves the Shepard tone illusion. So I went back to Trevor and asked him to render me an awful lot of Shepard tones, and he responded by rendering them at 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, and a minute, starting from every single note in the scale. I haven't used all of those, but it was really interesting to just get all of these Shepard tones and begin to see how they go when we can experiment with different versions of them working together. So this is a piece for additive synthesis, and my instrument that I've invented here, which is my reverse action piano harp.
So as Phil sets up, the Shepard's tone is going to come out of the computer, and there's actually a bit of silence before it starts when Phil's just playing the harp, so don't be concerned you can't hear it immediately. And just shout whenever you're ready, Phil.
Thanks very much, Phil. These illusions aren't exclusive to pitch information. This is a little bit of an experiment in itself. We invited a good friend of ours, Rob Turner, the drummer from Go Go Penguin, in to try and listen to the little file you're about to hear and see what he thought about it. And I've got to say, we all disagreed vehemently with each other what was actually happening. So I'm going to play it to you and see what you think about it. So let's just listen from the top of this. So somebody tell me what they think is happening. What's the obvious thing that's happening? Speeding up, it's getting faster, okay? So I think we all feel it's getting faster, but Phil, if you play the beginning, and I'm just going to click along. So this is a strong beat. Okay, we play the end. So we could argue that it's significantly slower, but what's happening really is that it's about the emphasis on particular subdivisions of those beats. So the subdivisions are emphasised in different ways, and it makes us hear the tempo at a different speed. We've done a little bit of an experiment, as I said. So Phil, if we could just listen to these two wave files that we've got. Rhythm 1. So this should be familiar to a lot of you. It's a very sort of traditional jazz rhythm. It's looped around a section from the recording that we made. Okay, so let's listen to rhythm 2. Okay. Hands up. Who thought that rhythm 1 was the fastest? Couple. Who thought that rhythm 2 was the fastest? There's disagreement, and then there's a whole load of you who don't think anything or have smelled a rat. Okay. Can we look at the video now, Phil, please? So what you'll notice is it's a constant click track. So the tempo is remaining exactly the same all the time. And anybody kind of familiar with jazz cymbal time patterns will know that we've got the repetition of these strong beats. And then he's shifting something in between them. And he changes this now in a very different way. So swinging it even harder, and that changes your perception of drive or potentially tempo. And in a moment we'll see the actual rhythms that we recorded marked on the screen. So rhythm 1. And then we get a big shift into the second rhythm that we heard. So these kind of illusory things that we listen into can be used within music as well as these more science-based experiments.
Now, you just heard Brendan tapping along to a beat, which is something we all can do, and it's something that as a musical animal we're very good at. And too many years ago it was thought that only humans could really do it. And then after a while they realised parrots could do it. And then, just only a couple of years back, they actually managed to train a sea lion to tap along to some music. what makes humans want to make music? And what abilities have we got that animals haven't got that allow them to make music? And for many years, it was thought that this beat entrainment, as it's called, was unique to humans. But as you can see, and you can find lots of videos now on YouTube, it's perfectly possible to train animals to do it as well. So it's not something that makes us uniquely musical or uniquely human, though we are probably better at it than most other animals. So why are animals good at this? Well, if you can imagine, one of the skills you need to survive in the wild is to be able to move very efficiently and very fast. And if I'm running away, I'm in the savannah, I'm trying to run away from, say, a saber-toothed tiger, the more rhythmically that I run, the faster I'll get away from danger. So it's obvious why other animals should have the ability to actually be incredibly rhythmic and be able to entrain to a beat, because it's part of survival. So I think we're going to go on to another illusion that I think Phil's doing for us, aren't you?
Okay, I want to begin this by just listening to a piece of music. If we just keep that fairly low for the first 20 seconds or so. This is Different Trains, 1988, Steve Reich. And what's striking about it, immediately it comes in, is how close the depiction is to a sound of a train. And this is about different train journeys, and what he uses in this is another effect. He takes spoken interviews with his nanny, who accompanied him on these train journeys. Okay, and what I'm interested in here is how you're perceiving the spoken word there, because I've told you it is spoken word. When you listen to that, do you hear somebody speaking? You do? Yeah, everybody does. But can you hear something slightly different about it? Something that might be cueing you to think in a slightly different way? Anybody hear anything? What can you hear? Okay. I'll make you think a little bit further. Listen to the shape of the violin melody in relation to the spoken word, and see whether just listen to it as if they're attached to each other. Have you got it now? Can you hear the contour of the violin melody? Yeah, it's going da 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 da. So I could actually take that spoken word. Fastest trains, they were the fastest trains, they were the fastest trains. Yeah. And I could sing that, and they were the fastest trains, and you're not hearing it as spoken word anymore. You're hearing it as sung, maybe. Yeah. Now, speech and pitch. We hear those very differently, and as I've said in an earlier illusion, you never do get access to the raw sound. It's all the pre-conscious processing that is done for you. So the you at the front of your brain quite often doesn't have a choice in what you perceive. And when we usually listen to spoken language, of course, we're not listening to the raw sound at all. What you're hearing in you is the meaning of the words that I'm saying. So you're not hearing it as a collection of sounds at all. So to make you link that spoken word to the violin is quite a leap, but it's making you subconsciously perceive it in a different way. Let's see if we can make that happen much more consciously. We're going to take the next bit, which we go on to Diana Deutsch. A little bit later, 1995, this is a scientist, and she is studying scientifically the speech-to-song illusion. So, just have a listen to
The
this.
sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
Now, we all agree that that is definitely somebody speaking. Yeah, it's definitely somebody speaking. And I'm going to do something now that will make you perceive that phrase that you just heard recorded completely differently, and it'll never go back. You'll never perceive it the same way ever again.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible. But they sometimes behave so strangely, they sometimes behave so strangely, 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 so strangely, so strangely, so strangely, so strangely.
So that by the end of that, I can go, we're all going to sing it. Okay, 1, 2. Sometimes behave so strangely. And you can all do it, can't you? Yeah? A few seconds ago it was spoken word, and now you're singing in it. Is the pitch content always there? Yes, the pitch content in speech is always there. You can hear my voice. I don't speak in a monotone. I get very excited when I'm lecturing and my voice goes up and down a lot. And there's lots of pitch content to it, but you're paying attention to the meaning of the words. More subconsciously, you are paying attention to the pitch content of my voice, but actually what that's probably telling you more about is how I feel about what I'm saying. Yeah? So you're not processing it as pitch. You're going, am I feeling nervous? Am I feeling excited? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Those are the kinds of processing that you're doing on that pitch content when you're listening to language most of the time. Now, all we've done there is repeat that loads and loads and loads of times, and suddenly you're hearing it as sung. Yeah? It's pitched. It's definitely got pitch content to it so that we can all sing it. And this study goes on. It goes on to study exactly how this works with groups of people. And the groups of people are sorted so that they are definitely able to pitch. They're all people that sing in choirs. And they're separated into groups so that half the group has heard the phrase only once. The other has heard it like you have there 10 times. Even though you've had a little break, it'll seem in the middle like she bursts into song when it gets to that phrase.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
It doesn't go away, does it? It doesn't go away. You still hear it as pitched. Yeah? So let's see how they do when they've heard it only once.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
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 Well, what a variation. And now from your perspective, you go, oh, they're getting it so wrong. Now remember, in this study, they're not told that it's sung or spoken or anything. They're just told to reproduce exactly what they've heard in terms of that phrase. And they're all getting it to different degrees accurate, aren't they? Some of them get the contours. Some of them are sufficiently accurate, actually, that you think if you were to loop that one and play it back loads, you probably get the same effect from that. And some of them are not. Some of them are really on a monotone, aren't they? But they all do agree on some things. What do they all agree on? The rhythm, yeah. Yeah, so they all get the stress and the rhythm right, don't they? So maybe that's what they've listened for more than the pitch. But if you hear it 10 times, just listen to the response that you get here.
Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
Now they're definitely singing, aren't they? Yeah. Maybe a little bit self-consciously, because perhaps they didn't expect to be singing because they were told nothing about, they were only told to reproduce it. Okay. So we might think that it's just an effect of the repetition, and this is actually what musicians have noticed most. That's definitely what Steve Reich did in his piece. He took these snippets of his interviews with his nanny and he looped them into tape loops and listened to them over and over again, did exactly what you've just done, in fact, and then took the pitch content that he'd heard and just simply wrote it on the violin and put that violin part before the spoken word, and that stimulates you to think there's something really a bit odd about the spoken word there. Okay? But it's not just a product of the repetition. This group, a little twist in the study, only heard the phrase once, but they didn't hear the whole phrase, just a little bit where you've been stimulated to hear pitch. But instead of telling them that it was spoken, this group were told that it was sung. And then they were told to reproduce it exactly. Have a listen to their responses.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
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 And they're definitely singing as well, aren't they? They're expecting to sing, so they're doing big singing, lots of them. Singing out, not frightened, expecting to have to sing. But in terms of the pitch, just look at how closely that corresponds for the sung responses to the people that heard the phrase 10 times. Yeah, it's an almost exact correspondence. So, there we go. Pitch content in speech. It's always there, but you're not aware of it. Of course, one of the differences between overtly musical behaviour and a spoken word is that the speech does continuously vary, whereas when we take music, we do tend to do lots of repetition.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible. But they sometimes behave so strangely, they sometimes behave so strangely, 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 so strangely, so strangely, so strangely, so strangely.